firstly, today the topic that we're going to talk about is communication. How do you communicate with clients, internal, external, as well as prospects? So from a marketing perspective, what we are dealing with, we're going to try and share with you a few things that we think could be valuable in your process of communicating with prospects, clients, internal, external. Okay, that's good? Okay. Both Cindi and I function online. We're very much online what we do. And from an online perspective, it's really good to know that every day there's about 5 billion searches online. So that's just in Google. That's not in Bing or any of the other smaller search engines. Just in Google alone, there are 5 billion searches. So I get a lot where people say to me, oh, but people don't search for me. You know, it's one of the nicest things that you can do. When somebody say that to you, he says, you know what, that's really serious. Let's just check. What is one of the search terms that people will use in your industry? And then I go online and I search it, and up comes 65 million search results. But there's nobody searching for me. So that is maybe my biggest challenge. But when you think of it really, the question is not anymore if people are searching for you. The only question is, do they find you? And that is what you have to consider, because that's your communication with internal and external clients or employees, as well as with prospects.
Yeah. Questions okay now or at the end?
Sure.
I can go now.
Okay.
With a quick question. So what if somebody says something like, well, that's the issue, is that there's not 65 million people looking for me. There are very few people looking for me, and there's a very crowded results landscape of 65 million people. So how do I stand out among?
Excellent question. So let's say, for instance, you're somebody like a realtor. And you say, but you know, I've got a small area. What is the value? What's the average value of a client for a realtor?
It's pretty high.
Yeah.
Pretty high. Yeah.
I just did an analysis for a company in Palo Alto. The average value per year is 71,000. The lifetime value is 330,000. Okay. So think of it like that. Do you need to have, you know, so many people find you? No. It all depends on your market and on what you're doing. And what you will find is that the lower the price point, the more people are anyway that's searching for it.
And tied to that, by next year, 2020, more than 85% of customers will have a relationship with an enterprise and will never interact with a human. So they're going to find you, and if they don't find you, and your questions, or if they don't find you, you're not even in the list. But if they find you and the information is not what they're looking for, you don't have a lot of chances because they're going to go off and do something else. So what Jaco does when he does research for his clients is to find out specifically, and he'll get into this in a little bit, what questions that people are asking, and specifically what type of answers your online presence needs to have in order to answer those questions, so that these people who come to you don't leave and go to the next one down the list.
But I think what's significant of what Cindy's saying here is that, you know, if you think back maybe 5 or 10 years ago, salespeople like Don had, oh, thank you. Salespeople like Don had all the answers. Salespeople had sort of like, you know, they had all the information. They were the powerful guys. Now they're not. Because I don't have to go to a salesperson to get my information. I just go online. So when you look at this, it reminds me that, I think it's now 3 years ago, Ford did a research project, and that over in December, and they said that over 80% of the people who came on the sales floor knew more about the car they wanted to buy than the salespeople. So if you do not show up and search, you cannot communicate with them. What if you don't communicate with people? Do you have a relationship? So the first thing I think the most important for us is to realize that you have to be online and you have to be communicating with people. Otherwise, you cannot be communicating.
And you have to make sure that the communication you have is targeted to the people, the exact people that you want to reach. Because if you talk, and you're not talking the language that somebody else is understanding, you're talking past them. So there was a study that was done 5 years ago, IBM did this study, and they interviewed 217 CMOs and CEOs across the world, and 80% of CEOs thought that they delivered an exceptional customer experience. But customers stated that average brands don't understand them, a significant portion. So what we try to do is understand what the goals are a company's reaching and make sure that the message is coming across in a way that is really effective for the customers who are reading it.
So that brings us to personas. You all know the word persona, some people say target market, but what was interesting, just in this room today, you and Frumi had a conversation about personas. You know, what does the people look like that we want here? And so you are now thinking, okay, who do we specifically do we want here? Is that any different from a company who wants to talk to people? They have to decide who they want to talk to. You asked a really great question just earlier when we were talking about personas. We're talking about, you know, the sort of the tangible and the non-tangible issues. And can you remember a few of those that you raised?
Yeah, so we have like a 10-point rubric that we use to qualify clients, and aside from like revenue, size, you know, all of that, and a lot of the intangibles are like, are they, you know, they have a lot of users at, you know, remote locations, very lopsided versus infrastructure present here versus, you know, global supply chain or remote users. Do they have weird schedules? Do they have non-standard configurations? How long have they been in business? How long will they stay in business given the vertical they're in? I mean, there are a lot of those intangibles really over time will eat up margin because the, you know, the amount of time you spend servicing an endpoint, which is the rubric that a lot of our firms use, is time spent per endpoint per month. Yeah. It goes up, but it's not usually the kind of stuff that we look at right away. When I get a referral, I can't ask those kinds of things. It's only a
And so the question comes then, how do you manage that? Who of you's got websites? Who of you got great websites?
Yeah, I do.
But
How do you define a great
Yeah.
website?
so I would say a great website is a website that communicates well and bring in the people that you want it to bring in for you. And the reason for asking that question is because so many times we will say, oh, you know, I don't want the wrong people to reach me. You know, if I've got 100 people coming contact me because they saw me online, then it's a big waste of my time. But the only reason it's a waste of your time is because we haven't looked at the persona. We haven't really defined who is it that we want to talk to. Because if you really know who you want to talk to, your message online will address them and they will self-select. If I stand in front of you and I say, during my introduction, I say, hey, I'm Jaco Grobbelaar, and I work with small companies in the trade industry. What do you think, what referrals am I going to receive? Okay. But if I say to you, Jaco Grobbelaar, and I work with mid-size to enterprise level companies in the heavy manufacturing industry, it's a total different. Okay. So you've got to think of what is the persona. And with persona, there are so many things that you need to find out around a persona.
All the demographic stuff. So where do they live? What's their age? What's their gender? How much money do they make? What's their religion? What's their education background? How savvy are they online? There's so many things you're going to ask. In addition to what position do they hold in a company? Are they the decision maker? How many levels do they have to go through first? You know, what's their company culture? What's their expectations as far as how long it's going to take to complete a sale? All those things come into context. So the closer you are to identifying the very specific best case scenario client that you can have, you'll be much, much more close to understanding how you can communicate with those people.
Yeah. We did a project for the Dairy Council of California because they've lost about 3 or 4 million visitors over the last 2 or 3 years, and they had no idea why. So we said, well, let's start with a persona. And when we gave them the persona, and so what we do for the personas, we go and we interview their clients. We look at prospects that we interview as well as clients that we interview. And they look at the persona and they go like, it's no wonder, we had the total wrong persona. We were talking to the wrong people. They had no idea where to find their people and who their people are.
Right, and why is this important to the people who are in the room, right? I mean, you probably aren't managing your own personal websites, right? You're advisors to companies. On the HR side, you might be dealing with people who are struggling to pull off a brand that is effective and consistently communicated through through their employees. So a sales team might need to speak the same language. You might have to have tools to be able to communicate that information as well. So from an HR perspective, both internal and external, to understand what their needs are. I mean, think about a website that we're all familiar with right now that is kind of difficult to use. Just think of one, and understand how frustrating it is, and how much time is wasted, how much effort is wasted, how much money is wasted there. And the same thing with an external customer. Think about the tax and the accounting and the CPA folks financial folks in the room. If you've got a whole bunch of people coming to your site and they're leaving, it's lost revenue. So you essentially have pieces of images up on a website that's not doing anything for your company. So the more targeted you can be, more effective you can be as far as making money using it as an asset.
Yeah. Have you guys ever done a brown paper exercise where you roll out the big roll of brown paper and you say to the sales team, say, hey, give me all your sales brochures. And what you get this collection of material, all supposed to be the same thing, but because everybody developed their own stuff, it's total different messaging that goes out. So when you think in terms of communication, make sure that you know who your persona is and that you have the same messaging.
Consistent message, right?
Well, in that messaging, we part of our standard process is asking people about their unique selling proposition, and I do it I make them all send them to me by email. Don't talk about it. And so you get whatever 20 of them come in, and the CEO, and when I ask them beforehand, everybody know? Yeah. Everybody understands it? Yeah. Then you get, then you open it like you're dealing. We have 10 different varieties.
Exactly.
We don't do that. I was like,
Yeah.
Exactly. So it really works.
Yeah. And speaking the language that people who are willing and able to listen to. It's just important. Okay, so you might be surprised that different age people think differently. I'm sure that that's probably a big shock to you. Think about the silent generation. These folks were born 1900 to 1945. These are the Depression era folks, World War II. What else happened during that time? Their thoughts are, they do things for the common good. It's quality that they're looking for. Waste not, want not. Those are kind of Depression era kind of thoughts in your head. They think differently than the baby boomers who were born from 46 to 64, who were part of civil rights, space travel. This is the sexual revolution that happened. So their ideas are spend now, worry later, right? They want to do their whole approach to equal opportunities and equal rights are very different than their previous generation. They're more cynical. They're more experimental. They want to make a difference. 65 to 76 is the Gen Xers, and they dealt with Watergate and the energy crisis and two-income families. Think of the latchkey kids. So the way they grew up was very different than the previous generation. So their whole approach to what motivates them is different than theirs. So they're looking for emotional security. They want immediate and ongoing regular feedback. They're entrepreneur. They reject the rules and introductions. Think about Watergate. They're going to be a little bit more not so trusting of the government potentially. They also value family time. The Gen Y, which is the millennial group, they're 77 through 95. These guys are like the Y2K. They're very child focused. Think about the helicopter parents and the lawnmower parents. They experienced terrorism, the shootings in the schools. They're the first people who dealt with the internet. So they're very achievement oriented, they're financial savvy, informal, short attention span, impatient. They want things done quickly. They have much higher racial tolerance and change. They don't trust the man, right? They don't trust government so much. They're a little bit standoffish when it comes to things like that. And then Gen Z, which is a digital age, which is people who they're in their 20s or so. They're a completely open book, except for when it comes to their finances. They don't have an expectation of privacy. Their data is shared all over. Their use of technology is crazy. It's omnipresent. They're very independent. They have a huge pressure to succeed. They thrive on tiny bits of information. Think about like status updates and Twitter feed, Twitter posts and things like that. They just live differently than the previous generation. So when you look, oops. Okay, well Gen Z doesn't get a shot here. But if you look at all the different approaches, if you know who you're speaking to and you know kind of the baseline of where they're coming from, then you know what ways to motivate them to take the next step, to engage them. You know the baseline. You know what kind of imagery to use. You know what kind of messages to come across.
So,
Yes.
so just a question there though.
Uh-huh.
You could be doing something where you're covering a whole
Absolutely.
lot of those, and then are you actually thinking that you sort of direct them to different kinds of pages?
That's the best case scenario.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we don't all have the luxury of doing that, but knowing who you're dealing with and knowing the conflicts that's potential, you might somebody from the silent generation might be looking for a different product or service than somebody from the Gen Y or the Gen Z. So making sure that you understand their customer journey is super important, because then you can present information in a way that makes the most sense to them. Yes,
Okay, this we work with a lot of different cultures.
absolutely.
This looks like a white breakdown. If I'm
100%.
dealing with an Asian or Hispanic, I'm dealing
100%.
Indian or Japanese or Chinese,
This is
how
all
does
US.
this work? It doesn't work the same way, does it?
It does not work the same way because everybody's coming from a different perspective.
In U.S., this is U.S., not international. This is U.S. culture, but their background, ethnic background, is not.
Exactly.
So it
yes.
just what you're saying is how important it is to make sure you know your persona.
Mhm.
Culturally, how do you talk to them? What are the yes, what are the no things? Yeah.
And these are the baseline. So what we do is we start with the base, and then we actually talk to just a mix of the demographic that they're looking for, and test out this, these processes and these tools and this content. Say, does this work for you? And then we can get immediate feedback. So if we know that there's going to be a mix of cultures, a mix of races, a mix of all these different things, we can approach things from a situational perspective, and be more targeted again, without starting with the generalities. But this is just knowing this, you know that you have to make sure that you understand who you're talking to so that you can talk to them effectively.
Cindy,
Yes.
and you guys you're looking at this from an external client or prospect or whatever, but internally dealing with your employees, this is probably even more important. I mean, Kim knows from her coaching business that when you approach an employee how productive they are,
Absolutely.
how they gather information, how they work in teams, how they deal with conflict, all of that stuff. It's just as important.
It
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And using technology to empower them to do their job.
Oh,
You have to hit different groups.
Are they team players or they're not?
I mean, we all know
Are they
we
using tools or
go
not?
in to see a prospect, and if I walk into a law firm versus I walk into a tech company, the office typically looks pretty different.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right.
People
We're
are doing
looking at
different.
people, for sure.
They work different.
Although, oh, sorry, go
So
ahead.
can I just answer here on this? One of our employees is a 60-year-old engineer, and when I hit 6:30 in the morning, when I sit in front of my computer, he's already going. The other one is a Gen X.
Z?
No, it's 27, 28.
Okay, yeah.
Gen X.
Or Y, excuse me.
Yeah. She only gets up at 10 o'clock, and we know it. But I can tell you, when I fire an email off to her at 7 o'clock at night, she's like, boom, she's on it. So yeah, those type of little, simple differences, but you have to, and the motivational techniques, totally different.
Totally
Oh,
different.
Management
Yeah.
techniques.
Oh,
Is
Right.
it money, is it time off, is it family, all those
Employment review
values.
process, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
Right.
Although the one thing I just did want to mention, which is quite interesting, so from a cultural perspective, from what you guys were talking about, there are definitely differences, but what is interesting is, and Frumi knows this as well, is that from a behavioral point of view, there's been many studies done. It does not actually matter what culture, like where you come from in the world, how you prefer to behave. It goes across all cultural divides. So kind of people are people. And so it's a little bit deeper than what you're talking about, but people who like data across the board. And, people who like attention across the board.
Yeah. So really understanding that. And
Right.
then you might have somebody who's perfectly suited for a job that would not be, a different person would not be. So tailor your, information to the people who you're dealing with, right? Okay, so what motivates for purchasing, and not just purchasing like e-commerce purchasing, but also what to engage them, to set up an appointment, to contact you, to sell your business to their CEO. What's going to motivate them to take the next step? Again, the silent generation, they are loyal, loyal to a fault, but they don't have all the flash that comes with the younger generation. So they've had this company, they work with this company, they're a solid company. I have no reason for me to change, right? For the baby boomers, they actually prefer shopping in person, and paramount to their motivator is their expectation of high customer service. We were just talking about this on the way in today.
The expectation of low customer. No customer.
So it's just like that's it. I don't care if it's a crappy product. If I get good customer service, I'm going to stick with them. That kind of a feeling.
There's some really interesting studies around this. Doctors that are not sued because the patient likes them. Totally screwed up.
Gen Xers, they research like crazy. They do search engines. They read blogs. They look at They want other people to help them make their decisions. So they're just absolute consumers of information. The Gen Ys, they rely on their friends and their family. If your friends like this, it's going to be a real likelihood that you will as well. Somebody was talking about a real estate person who brought in two different people. One of them was a millennial, and the person wouldn't make a decision until their friend came in and helped them make the decision.
Well, but they're the first Facebook generation, right? They're the first social
Yes.
media generation,
Absolutely.
So that's
100%. This is where the internet started with.
right.
And then
Sorry, Alex.
Just a quick question. So like I'm a 77, but somebody who's born in 95 is a completely different type of person. I mean, it's just like night and day. So these are fluid, I'm assuming.
they are. These are generalities,
Okay.
and this is only to illustrate that you're just talking to people with different baseline experiences, so they have different expectations. So for the digital generation, Gen Zs, instant gratification, right? Everything is moving all the time. They are constantly barraged. There's a constant barrage of information to them, and where they like to purchase things in a store versus online, which was really weird to me. They really expect their companies to have the tools and the services that supports their need for the omnipresence of data and multi-channel communication and things like that. Interesting. Okay, and then how to communicate to them. So we understand what their baselines are. We understand, what's motivating them. So what's the next step? No surprise that the silent generation is looking for papers, direct mail, newspapers, things like that. Simple. They like to have things in person. The baby boomers, they value the in-person customer service again. They're not people who make a lot of testing. They kind of go with their gut. They go with their first decisions. They like to be involved. So quizzes and videos help them to stay involved, and they also are very opinionated. They think that their opinion really, really matters, so asking them to share views helps to get them engaged.
And they own a lot of companies. You listen to the B2B guy, you guys know this is the wave is coming. That huge amount of ownership of the kind of companies we're going to go into are owned by that group.
It's changing though. It's changing very rapidly. So for the Gen Xers, they want clear messages, they want high value. They use laptops more often than their younger folks. They don't have the patience for the polls and quizzes. They just want to kind of get in and get the job done and get out again. The millennials, they rely heavily on, like I said, blogs and reviews, and they feel a pressure to being involved with social causes. And they switch devices, so they'll go from their laptop to their PC to their tablet, and then back, and then they expect to have everything kind of. Everybody should be everywhere, right? And so communicating to them in the places where they're looking, you're going to be more effective to talk to them in multiple locations. And then the digital age, 80% is influenced by social media. Insta is 44%, Snapchat is 21%, and YouTube is 32%. They will leave if it's slow. They expect everything, instant gratification. And then they say that authenticity is key. So they don't have any patience with the in-your-face ads and all that kind of thing. Yeah, they want it to be. So again, looking at all these different folks, you're going to be communicating with them on different platforms in different ways with different messaging.
Will the slides be available?
I can make the slides available. Sure.
Because I'm taking pictures of them.
Absolutely.
This is great.
I think this is being recorded, right?
It is. So by gender, you might be surprised that male and females also think very differently. If your target audience is female, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what motivates a female person versus what motivates male, because men question authority and women tend to trust authority. Men like short, direct, in-your-face language, calls to action, where it's really offensive to women. So they are softer, they're more polite. The lifestyle, the things that make the most impression for men are age, income, and education. Although a 30-year-old man versus a 50-year-old man, they're they still have the same kind of opinions and the same emphasis on these elements, where a woman, family status and employment status are their key elements. But if you're talking to a stay-at-home versus a working woman, they have very different perspectives, and their age is also very different. So you have to really, really understand this is the differences are not across the board for women. And then finally, decision-making, men make decisions for themselves. And women make decisions for themselves, their significant other, their children, and potentially their parents as well. So, how to communicate to them? I talk objects. They focus on minimal product details, but they're really interested in how a product, how the features work, right? And for women, it's about they're very people-centered. They multitask because they're doing a million different things at the same time. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a woman, but I know my husband, and I know if we're trying to task some things out, he'll do one thing and I'll do seven. So. And they suck in all the information, as much information they can. They want to make a really solid decision, so they research and they take it all in. So when it comes to customer experience, people will pay more money for a good customer experience. And again, by next year, the customer experience, or the way you talk and the way a person feels when they're interacting with you, will outweigh price and promotion as key brand differentiators.
So when you look at the slides, you can see the difference between male and female. My slides has got 1 or 2 points on it, and Cindy's just got
information.
But it's really, when you start digging into this, you start realizing how many factors are affecting your communication. And so when you send out an email, whether it's internal or external, and you do not get a response, here are some of the things that you need to start considering. Why are you not communicating with people the way that you thought you would be communicating? Okay. So we talked about the persona, and just go back for a moment, please.
Oh, sorry.
So when you think of the persona, in terms of communicating, specifically where we are in terms of generating business, so trying to communicate with prospects and clients, is to think of it, what I said earlier, it's about listening. What is it that they're trying to solve? Do they have an issue? Do they have a problem? Do they have an opportunity? What is it that they're trying to do? Because if you don't know that, then what answer are you communicating, or what information are you making available? So our ability to really listen and hear what they are asking of us is crucial in communication. And have I said anything now that you haven't learned when you were in school already? We know these principles, but we sort of sometimes we forget about it. And there's so many other things that comes in our life and our business that we forget the basics. The things that we talk about here it's really basics. People have got to have a problem, they have an opportunity, how do you help them to solve that? If you can do that the correct way, you not only position yourself as an expert, but you're creating business.
Okay, and so there are lots of methods that we do this. You know, we talked about the baseline ethnographic research, which is, you know, all the stuff that we talked about in the previous slides, right? We can also do something that's called customer journey mapping, which is where somebody can identify what a person is thinking, feeling, and doing through every stage that they have with an organization, from before they meet them to when they come onto the site to when they're making a purchase to the post-purchase. And if you can identify how, you know, what methods they're using, what questions they might have, in what way they're feeling excited or frustrated, you can identify some of the opportunities that when you are in this section, here's what you want to put up front, here's what you want to prioritize, here's what you want to make available to this particular persona at this particular time. So it makes finding information so much more easy than somebody who has to hunt around.
Cindi, what were those topics on the top of the chart?
The topic, these are these right here.
No, the ones below the
These
chart.
right here?
The gray one.
Yeah.
This right here or this?
No, the one going
For this
horizontal.
particular site,
Yeah.
this is a T-Mobile Tower site. Research and planning, educating, selecting, onboarding, issue resolution, and then I think it's post.
Okay, that's why I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
so it's just the different phases. So usability studies is when you actually sit with somebody and create a script that's a regular scenario that they would go through when they're interacting with you online, and watch them. Watch them, you know, are they finding the information, are they struggling, are they saying, I don't know what this is? Are they like, oh, you know, you can tell so much. You may make the assumption it's gonna be right, but in different situations, you never know. So what people say they're gonna do and what they actually do sometimes are vastly different. And I'm always astounded when I do usability studies, how many never would have thought of that.
Cindi, don't you guys have some technology to track their eyes on the screen?
Yes.
What is it? Is it coming from the digital camera, or how does it?
They can wear glasses, but we also do recordings on the screen using their camera that you actually track their eye movements and their clicks, and then you're recording them and all the activity they have on the site at the same time.
Or
It's more natural.
heat mapping, where they track where the cursor is going.
Okay, and then focus groups is situations where you gather a bunch of people, maybe all employees or all managers or all people who are trying to access maps on a website or whatever, and ask them situations like that, you know, where would you get stuck? What kind of information you need? What kind of things are important to you? What scenarios would you need to have information here? And then use that to feed to offer recommendations and suggestions on improvements for a company. And then what traffic stats? Looking at the traffic that a company goes when they have an online presence, where they're going, what pages they're hitting, what keywords they're searching for, what tools they're using.
You know, Cindi referenced the buyer's journey. If you think of the buyer's journey, it's all about they become aware. It's an awareness. And then it's sort of, okay, if we've got aware, we search, and then we consider the information that we have, and then we make a decision. So for everybody, it's basically those 3 steps. One thing that's very basic that you can use is something like, say, Google Analytics, that everybody has got access to. And when you get to your Google Analytics, obviously the first thing it tells you how many people are visiting your website. And you can see is there seasonality, what is going on. But when you start digging a little bit deeper, you can also see how much time do they spend on your site. There's a big difference between somebody who spends 10 seconds versus somebody that spends 40 seconds. It doesn't sound like it's a big difference, but it is really a big difference. How many pages do they consume?
What pages do they consume?
What pages do they consume? But think in terms of how many pages they consume. Do they just go to one page? Well, if you're a contractor and they're just looking quickly for a telephone number and then they jump off, that's something different. But if you have a more complicated product or service that you're in and people just on one page and they hop off, that's a bounce. So they are not getting the information that they're looking for. So get familiar with your Google Analytics, and you can see, are people bouncing? What is my bounce rate? Then change your information and see if your bounce rate goes down. Or look at bounce rate for a certain time of the year, and then see, oh, when did we add new content? So as Cindi said, go and look at different pages. Because when you see a page that has got a good interaction with it, go and look why. Is it because you have call to actions on that page? Is it because you have more content, that you write the content differently? So, you know, there are a lot of things that you can consider there in terms of how do I interpret the data so that I can communicate better with them.
Right. And if you have a page that nobody's going to, and it's an important page, you kind of want to find out what that is. So
Just one thing, never delete a page. You never delete content.
But you want to make sure that
you can upgrade it. As you can see. Always, it's actually a great strategy. If you go and look at your pages, and you see pages with high usage versus low usage, combine the two. So if it's the same topic, combine the two and redirect from the one that you basically cancel. But never remove content from your website, because many times when people redesign a website, they're like, oh, this is what we want to be known for. All those other pages that we've developed over years, they don't bring them over. Google look at this. Oh, suddenly all this content that's been indexed is now this narrow. So your online authority just diminished right there.
So where do you put it, Jaco? Where is there like an archive?
You can have
so
an archive.
It's still someplace that they can search, but it's not getting in the way of your clients looking for the right
You look
stuff.
at your keyword architecture that you build for your site, and they may not be on the higher levels. Okay, pretty much what we just said is that when you look at your communication with people, what are the 3 people that's on your website at any time, or looking at your content at any time?
Who are the
What are the types of people?
competitors?
Clients and employees.
Competitors.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. But
Insomniacs.
so why look at it from? Oh,
Well, not your Facebook.
IRS.
so think of it. Look at the sales funnel. If you can utilize the sales funnel sort of as an orientation, on the top of the sales funnel, who are the people on the top of the sales funnel? Now, the people who are busy educating themselves, people who are learning about products or services or things like that. People in the middle of the sales funnel. So those are the people that's in the awareness stage of the buyer's journey. People in the middle of the sales funnel, who are they?
They've already done the research. They're starting to narrow it down to, hey, I think I want this one or that one.
Yeah. So they're middle of the funnel. We say just in general, they are busy making sure about their buying criteria. They are determining their buying criteria. Do I go big? Do I go small? Do I go wide? Do I go yellow?
And in the customer journey map that we saw previously, it would be like the second and the third stages of the interaction.
Yeah. So typically your content differs on these different levels. Top of the funnel, where you're busy educating people, what would you have there? Blogs, white papers, guides, videos, things like that. But it was of an educational nature. While more in the middle of the funnel, where people are making up their buying criteria, think of things like a checklist or maybe a case study. Because in those type of instruments, you are telling them, oh, look for this, consider this. So if you can get them to consider your buying criteria, where are they going to buy at the end of the day? And then obviously when they get to the decision stage, think of what are you giving them to help them make that decision. So if you look at a typical communication, somewhere on it you will have a call to action, or what we call a CTA, where you give them more related information to what's on the page. Maybe a little bit lower, you will have another call to action that gives them a checklist or a case study. And then another one would be where you say, hey, what about a free demo? Or what about a conversation? So how do you get in front of them? Because now they are on the bottom, they're on the decision-making stage. So how do you get in front of them?
And why is this important for communication as far as placing this information on your online presence is because if you throw everything at everybody all at the same time, they're like, whoa, way too much. I only need this much right now because I'm only at this space. And it's much more efficient for them to absorb the information than to vomit it all up at the same time.
Yeah.
So question, guys.
Yes.
More and more these days is I'll go on any site and you get a pop-up, can they help you? All right, so to your point, it's if 85% of people aren't interacting directly, seems like more and more you're getting the ability to get help from that site as to whatever question you might have.
So it's a chat box.
Stage you're at.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it better work.
Yeah.
Better work in it.
Those are so.
I don't know if you had that experience where you said, yeah, I need this. And they, oh, we can't help you.
And what's funny is that some generations really expect that and some don't. And there's actually some people who would prefer a menu to do a click, 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 and others who will prefer to do a search box. and others that were like, I don't want to call anybody. I just want an answer on chat. And so it really depends on their motivators and what their expectations are. Yes.
We're, as a service provider, what we're finding is they don't come to our website till they've done a LinkedIn. They check the individual first, and before they even come to our website, because we already know that when they come. Very seldom, they hear us, we're in a panel or we're talking and we get a referral. They look at the person on LinkedIn. If the LinkedIn looks okay, then they'll go to the website. We're seeing more and more of that.
Absolutely.
That's our screen.
And you can track that, right? When they connect from the LinkedIn, when they hit your website on LinkedIn, that shows up in analytics, right?
And so consider that LinkedIn is just one element of the communication tools you have for your customer. Your website is not the end all be all. There are all kinds of, particularly because there are multiple generations who are searching different tools and making different decisions using different avenues than others.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. You have a UTM code that you put on your content. When they click on it, it tracks it. Yeah.
But the standard website you put on the LinkedIn profile, that won't show up when it hits my website. For if they click on there, there's no trail. Google Analytics doesn't know that came from LinkedIn.
Now Google Analytics will be able to tell you because they look at the UTM code that you have put on your content.
Okay.
So it's a code that you put on your content that indicates where it comes from. The other thing that we talked about earlier, maybe just to reflect back, is when you terms of people visiting your website. So there are what they call content optimization systems. So when people visit you, your website or Google, depending what software you have, will track their IP address if they don't know who the person is. So if that person comes back, but let's say that person completed a form on your site and they indicated that they are middle level management or they have this specific interest, the content on your website will change, or can change rather, depending on who is visiting it. That's how dynamic it is. Somebody asked that question. As the content page by page can differ depending on which person comes onto the website.
And that's actually becoming more and more expected action. We have just about 1 minute.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
What's UTM?
It's a tracking code. It's just a tracking code that you. Oh, what is the
Universal tracking method?
Universal tracking method, yeah. Sorry, just noticed UTM. Yeah, it's a tracking code that you put on your content, and then you can track and see who is using it and where do they come from.
And finally.
Yeah. When you do the calls to action, maybe related to what you just asked, what is UTM? Make sure that there's consistency in your communication. So when people are on a page, make sure that when they go to a next page, they have the same experience. It's got a lot to do with your brand experience, the consistency in how they experience you. But the main thing is, whenever people is on your page, if you don't ask them or tell them to do something, they will go to somebody else's website.
Make it easy for them.
Tell them what you want them to do next. So you use a call to action that pulls them over to a page or a landing page where you can capture their information. The most important, I think the most valuable information nowadays is customer info or prospect info. How do you follow up with people if you don't have that information? So whenever you can capture that information, then that allows you to communicate better with them. If I know what you are searching for, ask people. What are you looking for? What solution do you want? These landing pages are very easy to implement, and you can ask many, many questions. But be careful. When somebody visits you for the first time, don't try to get too much information, because then they will just leave. So first build some sort of relationship with them. And then every time they come back, you can ask them more and more information. And these landing pages actually adapt. When the person comes to your page the first time, it will ask them maybe name and email address. The next time they come, the landing page recognizes them and maybe add 2 or 3 questions. So every time, not only is it new questions, but it's more intense questions as well, because you're busy building a relationship with them.
So we're going to skip the trends and then go to, do we have time for one question?
Yes, we have time for 2 questions.
Okay, 2 questions. Anybody? There's been great questions so far. It's been really appreciated.
For the generation of people that use all those multiple devices, and you were just talking about the tracking, will you know it's them if they came from their office computer and then they went somewhere else.
Yeah,
And now
Google-
they're coming off their phone and then they're doing it on
That's
their
a great
iPad later.
question.
Yeah. As long as you have, say, for instance, your Google Analytics codes implemented on your website, then they will pick it up as well. Or depending what software you are using. For instance, we're a HubSpot business partner, so we use HubSpot, so we can track that through that. You know, it's interesting, we just had this month a few good referrals. And each time the people said, oh, okay, tell me what's going on my website. So we went and we looked, and we couldn't get anything. So we looked for the Google tracking number on their website, we couldn't find it. And in both cases, the people were just finished with a website upgrade. So they forgot to implement their Google tracking code on the new website. You know, so when you do a website upgrade, that is one thing to remember, because otherwise you have no stats.
Must be the same guy that did the ProVisor site.
Right, but you know,
We're
the
looking
other,
for good things.
I mean, I don't know if anybody else has the experience, like I'm actually probably in a bad way addicted to Instagram. So I can be on Google on my laptop and I can like search for something, like say I'm looking for a new couch for my office. And I go on to Instagram and I will scroll through my feed and there will be ads for couches.
And some people really like that, and some people are really creeped out about it.
It is very, you know what, I'm
creepy.
super creeped out about it, but you know, they're so targeted. You know, they like just offer me things that I
From a
want.
different perspective.
That's what's so infuriating.
You know, think of it from a different perspective. Kim, Don talked about the CRM implementation. You know, nowadays with this tracking, when you have somebody that visits your website, you've got no idea who they are, you just have an IP address, but you've got no idea who this person is. Then one day they decide to actually download something and give you their name. Now you have a whole history, because then their name lines up with their IP address, and you can see this person has been visiting you for the last 6-7 months, and they've actually looked at this. So now when you connect with them, you have information relevant to what they were looking for.
Relevant, so it's
Well,
beneficial.
most of the CRMs, I know, I'm sure HubSpot, they all track anybody you have in your CRM, and they'll see what happens because they're already in your CRM.
Yeah.
It's interesting, they can go backwards once you get a name and get the history, huh?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So the question I have about, okay, we determined there is a person, now you know their name, so what kind of additional search that, from my perspective, violates my privacy? What can they buy, what kind of information can they buy from Amazon, from Instagram, from Facebook, to learn more about me? That's my question, and it's a two-sided, I understand.
What do you like to read on Amazon?
I like Hoopla, that's public library, for free, so.
And what else? Do you buy books on
I
Amazon?
do, actually, still, I do buy financial stuff, you know, professional books on Amazon.
So now when I go and analyze what you have read in the
Right.
past, I know where your interests are. So now if I want to put ads in front of you, what ads do you think I'm going to target for you?
Or content also, you know, from a personal or from a company's website, you know, to provide a case study that might be of more interest to you than
So
somebody else.
my question is, so if I'm a business owner and I'm implementing all of the strategies on my website, so I can probably buy some stuff from Amazon in terms of data.
Yeah, but I think
Or
that is
analytics.
sort of when you go and you buy information, but just pertaining to your specific website. Let's say, so in your area that you function in, you have people visiting your website, they're consuming your content. When that history lights up, you can see what type of specific information, what type of blogs were they reading, what are they downloading. So
No,
you can really zoom in.
I understand that, I'm just going to outside vendors of data,
Okay.
that's my question, I guess. Where Amazon is the vendor, where I can buy data about someone, everyone.
Yeah, I posted an article about this a couple months ago on LinkedIn. It's called something, it was written by the Times, it's an expose by the New York Times about your mobile device is tracking you and knows where you are, or something was the title of the article. It's pretty creepy. They talk about the data supply chain for vendors, for retailers.
Your phone hears you.
Yeah, every
Next you're
device
getting
has a signature,
an ad for
IP
someone.
address, MAC address, device ID.
So
And who
data-
trusts
data-
Alexa?
Data is so valuable, it's super valuable, but the goal for these organizations is to improve the customer service so that you get more sales.
I mean, think of geo-targeting, you know, where they know where you are and they give you an ad because there's a company like that in that mall or area that you are.
So now you know who the experts are in this whole user experience thing is.
By the way, traveling overseas, they're more effective than we are.
What you
Oh, in
land
China,
in-
it's